Hi everyone, I'm Dan, and welcome to the 80's Emporium, your top secret hideout for everything 80s. While we are currently living in the golden age of superhero movies, it's doubtful the genre would be where it is today without the achievements of a handful of superhero films from our favorite decade. So today, we're flying back in time to take a closer look at the superhero movies of the 1980s. The first attempt at bringing a superhero to the big screen as a blockbuster feature was in 1978 with the Richard Donner-directed Superman. At $55 million, it was the most expensive film ever made to that point.
It's open, come in.
But it was a smash hit, earning $300 million worldwide and 3 Oscar nominations. The tagline was, "You'll believe a man can fly," and the cutting-edge special effects made true on that promise. A series of sequels followed in 1980, 1983, and 1987, each with diminishing returns and declining reviews.
And the name of the game is making money.
Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, was the final nail in the coffin for the franchise, and is often called one of the worst films ever made.
Abominable!
Not many people know about 1984's Supergirl, or the fact that it is a spin-off of the Christopher Reeve series, as it once again features Mark McClure as Jimmy Olsen. But the Helen Slater-led film was largely criticized, and acclaimed actors Peter O'Toole and Faye Dunaway were even nominated for Razzie Awards. As for Helen Slater, she would become a DC icon, portraying characters in both 2001's Smallville and 2015's Supergirl.
Kara, your oven's not the best. Would you mind giving it a quick 5 seconds or so?
Famed horror director Wes Craven, the man behind Scream and A Nightmare on Elm Street, crossed over into the superhero genre with Swamp Thing, a lesser-known DC Comics hero who was created in 1971. Starring 80s scream queen Adrienne Barbeau alongside Dick Durock, the dark and moody film was well received, but it was a box office disappointment.
I don't understand.
However, the film did incredibly well on home video, which prompted a sequel in 1989, which was less favorably received.
Is there a Mrs. Swamp Thing?
No.
Durock returned to his role in a Swamp Thing TV series in 1990, which ran for 72 episodes. Barbeau was given a guest starring role in the short-lived 2019 TV reboot. After working together on Beetlejuice, director Tim Burton and actor Michael Keaton teamed up once again, this time for a superhero film called Batman. In the 80s, Batman was fading from popularity, mostly because he was widely associated with the 1960s campy Adam West-led TV show. But this film explored the darker sides of both Batman and the Joker, and audiences responded. Batman, along with the acclaimed 1986 comic book miniseries The Dark Knight Returns, showed audiences and filmmakers that superhero movies could work as dark dramas. Batman inspired not only 3 sequels, but also an award-winning animated series. The film was a massive boost to Batman's popularity and sent him on his way towards becoming one of the most iconic superheroes of all time. Orion Pictures entered the genre with sci-fi action satire RoboCop, which starred Peter Weller as a police officer turned cyborg, who struggles to regain his humanity after being turned into a machine. The film was made for $13.7 million, with $1 million of that going toward the creation of the RoboCop suits. The movie was a success, both critically and financially, and gave rise to multiple sequels and multiple television shows. Like Star Wars before it, the film launched a massively successful merchandise campaign. It also led to a comic book series and a number of video games. Flash Gordon, based on the popular comic strip from the 1930s, starred Sam J. Jones as a New York Jets quarterback who travels to the planet Mongo in order to save the universe from an evil emperor.
You want to destroy me?
It's the only way to save Earth.
The film clearly hoped to emulate the success of Star Wars, and all the cast members had signed on for multiple films. But despite a hit soundtrack from the iconic rock band Queen, the film failed to make a splash, or should I say, flash, at the box office. While Wonder Woman is often celebrated as one of the original female comic book heroines, she's not the first woman superhero to star in her own comic book. That honor goes to a character named Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, who was introduced in 1938, 3 years before the world met Wonder Woman. In the 1984 film adaptation, Sheena, played by Tanya Roberts, fights to protect her land from another football player and his mercenaries by using her ability to speak telepathically with jungle animals. But, like many other superhero movies of the era, Sheena was a flop. If you want to give your friends an affordable and unique gift that will make you a superhero in their eyes, check out Stu Pollard on Cameo. All profits go towards the charitable efforts of Trunacy. When we think of superhero comedies, films such as Shazam, Guardians of the Galaxy, or Ant-Man may come to mind, but the superhero comedy was alive and well in the 1980s. Well, maybe not well, but certainly alive.
Nothing could possibly go wrong.
In 1980's Hero at Large, John Ritter is hired to promote a movie by wearing a superhero costume, and accidentally ends up stopping a robbery.
How about that? Hey, I would never believe it if I didn't see it with my own eyes.
Disney's 1981 film Condorman is about a comic book writer who takes on the persona of his fictional hero when he realizes that he can help a KGB spy defect to the US.
He is not an agent of the CIA. He is a writer of comic books.
Condorman was badly reviewed, ending the franchise before it could begin. Still, the film has gained a following over the years. It's difficult to talk about live-action superhero movies of the 80s without including one important television show, the ABC comedy The Greatest American Hero. Starring William Catt, who you might recognize as Carrie's prom date, the show followed a substitute teacher who was given a superhero suit that gave him extraordinary abilities. Unfortunately, however, he lost the manual. The Emmy-nominated show, which ran for 44 episodes, is most well known for its iconic theme song, Believe It or Not, which charted at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. Catt went on to star in 9 Perry Mason TV movies as Detective Paul Drake Jr. At age 72, he continues to act to this day. Believe it or not. Before Deadpool, Kick-Ass, and the Suicide Squad, there was The Toxic Avenger, an R-rated comedy that parodied the superhero genre. The gory film was a financial success and instant cult classic. 2 sequels came out in 1989, followed by a 4th in 2000, and a 5th is currently in development, starring Peter Dinklage. If you guys are enjoying this video, please give us a like and subscribe to this channel. Meanwhile, other countries, likely inspired by the success of Superman, also tried their hand at making their own superhero films. Italy's L'Uomo Puma, or the Puma Man, focused on an American paleontologist who discovers he has supernatural powers, such as super strength, night vision, and the ability to sense danger. As for Puma Man himself, Walter George Alton, he appeared in Heavenly Bodies and retired from acting shortly after a total of only 4 films. The film was a flop and critically panned. Super Fuzz, sometimes also called Super Snooper, another Italian 80s superhero comedy released the same year, was directed by spaghetti western filmmaker Sergio Corbucci, but was shot in English in Florida, with the hope that it would appeal to American audiences. It played constantly on HBO throughout the 80s. The film focused on a rookie police officer, played by Terrence Hill, who gains a number of superpowers after an accident, with only one weakness: seeing the color red. While there are plenty of superhero comedies, there are very few that are also musicals.
What the world needs now is a shining hero.
In The Return of Captain Invincible, Alan Arkin plays an alcoholic ex-superhero who was forced into retirement after being labeled a communist in the 1950s. Talk about seeing red. But when his archenemy, played by Christopher Lee, steals a super government weapon, Arkin is asked to return to action. The Australian film was a box office flop, despite songs from Richard O'Brien and Richard Hartley, the duo behind the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Here's the rare 80s superhero movie that was a huge success. Mr.India, a 1987 Indian superhero cult classic that is still often called one of the greatest Bollywood films of all time. Mr.India is a street violinist who inherits an invisibility cloak and must face off against a criminal hell-bent on taking over India.
Hail Mogambo, King of India!
The villain, named Mogambo, is played by Amrish Puri, who also played Mola Ram in The Temple of Doom. Mogambo is often hailed as one of the most iconic Bollywood villains of all time. The hero is played by Anil Kapoor, who you may recognize as the game show host in 2008's Slumdog Millionaire. The film was remade twice, and Kapoor is attached for a direct sequel. Despite having a vast roster of popular heroes in their arsenal, Marvel Comics decided to make their first theatrical release of the 80s about one of their lesser-known and weirder characters.
It's Howard, thank you.
Howard the Duck, which centered around an anthropomorphic avian alien antihero, was produced by George Lucas, who had just released Return of the Jedi, and starred Leah Thompson in her first role after Back to the Future. Robin Williams was actually set to be Howard's voice, but he quit the project within the first week.
Undoubtedly one of Earth's greatest minds here.
That turned out to be a good move. The film was torn to shreds by critics, and it lost Universal over $45 million. But there is still hope for Howard. The film has a loyal fan base, and the character has cameoed in a handful of recent Marvel projects voiced by Seth Green, sparking hope that he may one day get his redemption on the big screen. Marvel's most successful live-action character in the 80s was the Incredible Hulk. Starring Bill Bixby as Dr. Banner and bodybuilder Lou Ferrigno as his super-powered alter ego, a highly successful TV show ran from 1978 to 1982. After the series ended, the stars convinced NBC to create 3 more Hulk-based TV movies. These involved team-ups with Thor and Daredevil, and in the final film, the Hulk's death. Bixby himself sadly died of cancer 3 years later. Future Marvel films would honor the series by having Ferrigno cameo in the 2003 and 2008 Hulk movies.
You are the man.
2 years after He-Man, Dolph Lundgren took on the role of Frank Castle, the anti-hero known as the Punisher. However, this version veered significantly from the comics, especially with regards to the costume. It was released internationally, but due to financial difficulties, the film actually never made it to American theaters. However, in 2021, the film received new life on Netflix, where it spent some time in their top 25. The superhero movie has evolved into one of the most popular genres in the world, and it shows no sign of slowing down. But it owes much of its successes to the advancements, failures, risks, and successes of the superhero movie of the 80s, the brave few that came before their time. Please like this video, subscribe, and follow us on social media. Stay tuned for our next video. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
Oh shit. There goes the neighborhood.